So, welcome everyone to another day of the 12 Steps of Christmas. Thank you so much for joining us. Kaushik, how are you today?
I'm incredible. Yeah, just feeling amazing.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming in to speak with our Infinite Self-Love Society. And just to give them a little bit of context, we met only when was that? A month ago?
Yeah, perhaps a month ago. Yeah.
Yeah, we were.
Global Unity conference, I guess.
Yeah. And I really got what Kaushik was saying that day. And I was like, yes, he should definitely be a guest. So I'm super grateful to have your expertise in the group. So would you like to talk a little bit about how you've got to being where you are now? What's your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So coming off of high school, I started with very basic ground roots science and without any direction into where I was going. But very early in my studies, I had a near-death experience up in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. And that completely changed my perspective. And science in that moment became a paradigm too small to explain what I was comprehending. But I still needed an explanation, and I had already started on the path of science. So from biological science and animal behavior, which I was studying back then, I decided to shift my focus more onto neuroscience and understanding consciousness. And that's how it started. I started with neuroanatomy, working at that time. I was still sort of borderline animal behavior work. So I was actually doing brain surgery on sharks to start off with. And then when it got to my PhD, I think back then the most cutting edge brain research was the Human Connectome Project, which is similar to the Human Genome Project, mapping the entire synaptic connections of the human brain. So I was involved in that. And now I guess the industry has changed again. So I work a lot with AI. But I have to basically say that science still is a paradigm too small to comprehend the concepts that I have been trying to reverse engineer. And so even though science has been a modality that I use to share the information, it's basically a craft, a language for me to share the message of love. And that's truly what my research has been focused on.
Wow. So brain surgery on a shark. How was that?
Yeah, in actual fact, it took an emotional toll, really. I had to put the animals down afterwards, and that wasn't that great. So yeah, after a while, I had decided never to work with animals again.
Okay. And what is your journey with self-love? How's your path in that?
Yeah, so again, I try to understand the mechanism of how things work. That's basically similar to a woodworker who understands how to use his tools. Science is my tool for understanding. And I started, basically, there was an event 10 years ago in 2010 where my heart literally had exploded with so much love that my body could not contain it. And it was coming from an experience where the weight of emotion at that time, the emotion I was feeling was a lot of anger and rage. That emotion had compounded to the point where it imploded upon itself. And when it did, it was as if there was a star that had suddenly become a black hole, and then the Big Bang happened in my chest, and the universe is still expanding to this day. And that expansion felt like love. After that experience, I could not deny that there was a power that was within me that was far greater than anything I could think. And so from that point forward, love consumed the rest of my days. And then everything I did was to compound that state of love. And so I started, as I said, with consciousness, trying to understand how the brain operates on love. But as I investigated more and more, I started descending into the subconscious and eventually ended up in the body, which led me back to the heart. And since then, I've been working on the rhythms of the heart. I use things like heart rate variability, vagal tone, many, many metrics that we use to measure how the heart fluctuates in different events, in different emotions, and then use science to actually train that. So it creates a harmony, a synergy within the body, and that translates into our brain as well. And in turn, it then reflects in our behaviors. So then all our actions are filled with love.
Wow. Amazing. So there's a few things in there when you said, like, trying to understand how the brain operates on love. How does the brain operate on love?
Yeah, so that's a beautiful question. So we all know oxytocin, right? Oxytocin is basically the bonding hormone. It creates trust, it creates empathy, it creates connection. And unlike neurotransmitters, which are short latency, so neurotransmitters are basically serotonin, dopamine, it's basically an emotional hit. Oxytocin is a neuromodulator. It establishes long-term connections. And it doesn't simply come straight away like a neurotransmitter. We have to work on it to generate it. And so to generate it, of course, there's so many self-love practices, which I'm sure you share with your community. And of course, there's external love as well. Love from friends, love from family. All of that is really important to circulate love within your system. But to really generate that love, I found that it really comes from the heart. The brain is just the chemical concoction of that state. So the feeling is actually centered around the heart.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
This is great. So what's the difference in the body? These are things that I often wonder, and I'm really glad that you are going to have the answers, like the actual answers. What's the difference in the body between the love you might get from your partner, which is that, you know, when I'm with my partner, I'm just like, oh, it's like heaven to touch, and the self-love, which is a different sensation in my body. But what would you say is the actual similarities or differences?
That's a very interesting question, and I'm not sure if I have the full answer to that, but I'll give you my version of it.
Mm-hmm.
The love that I speak about is a self-generated love. And it is not dependent on anything external. It is inexhaustible and unconditional for that reason. So it's basically a limitless reservoir of love coming from within you. The love that you may receive from someone else, of course, that is not just love. It has intimacy. It has a sexual charge to it sometimes as well. So it's a mixture of emotions, and sometimes we have imagery or emotions attached to that as well. So that can fade. It may change over time, but the love that we generate within ourselves, that doesn't change. It is, as I say, an unconditional and limitless source of love.
Yeah, that's just really opened up something for me, because that sometimes my clients or friends even might say things like, self-love's great, but there's really no substitute for it, like, you know, your gorgeous partner or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, it's mirroring from that relationship you have from yourself with yourself, but then it does come with like the hormones and the sexuality and, you know, all the other things wrapped in, which I guess can come with your self-love as well. But yeah, that's made it really clear why that feels different and why that could be addictive as well, getting love from the outside.
Yeah. So that's a very important point. We are creatures that are addicted to emotional hits. If we don't get a positive emotional hit, we might find a negative emotional hit. Regardless, we just want some form of emotional hit, whether it's from a partner, whether it's from, you know, following politics, or whether it's from, you know, like it can be positive or it can be destructive. But we do get addicted to those hits. When we talk about self-love, as I say, it's a neuromodulator. It's not dependent on the dopamine hit that we get. So it is a neuromodulator. And to put it into a different way of understanding this, emotions have a very short latency, so they expire very quickly. Then you have mood, which is has a longer latency. So mood can last anywhere between a few minutes to a few hours, sometimes even half a day. Or in chronic cases, that becomes temperament. It goes for days and sometimes weeks. And at a certain point, if that becomes chronic, then it becomes temperament and you're locked into a state. So your state can be hedonic, it can be filled with love, or it can sort of spiral downwards and then you're locked in a, say, a depressive state or a state of anxiety. So when I talk about emotional hits, I'm talking about the very short latency experiences that you have. When I talk about self-love, I'm talking about neuromodulators, and oxytocin, as I say, takes a long time to establish, and it strengthens the neural pathways in the brain. So you actually get locked in to a state of love.
Mm. Super interesting. I love that. And I love what you said, that it's inexhaustible. Like, I love that word when we're talking about self-love. Like, I also talk about this infinite well of love that we can tap into anytime, any place. But what you said, that, yeah, it's there all the time, but we have to work a bit to get it going, to feel it, to like, it's always there, but we have to kind of flex that muscle and create those pathways. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've probably heard of, you know, in psychology, they talk about unconscious incompetent and conscious incompetent and then conscious competent. Have you heard of this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We want to get to that unconscious competent stage of love. So we keep practicing love until it gets to the point where it is innate in our bodies and we don't have to even think about it.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm in a constant state of love, and I didn't used to be, but I kind of had an awakening to love. And since that day, even though there's ups and downs and I've had a dark night of the soul in there somewhere, I've had a pretty much constant state of love, or like also connection to trust, which is also a version of love, I think. So do you think, like, when you say you really study consciousness and love, like, is that available for all people, or is it something that some souls might have in this lifetime and some might not?
Yeah, that's a very important question, actually. I have worked with people who I found that they've experienced so much love, but because of their story, because of what they're attached to, they're not able to sustain it. And so they constantly slip back into their previous or former selves. And because they're attached to a previous version of themselves. They don't allow love to take over, basically. So yeah, it is available to everyone. It's harder for people who are stuck in pain, because pain, when it has dominated majority of your life, it speaks louder than love, and people are familiar with that voice. And this is the great paradox, like pain and fear are things that we think are protecting us. And over time, because of that familiarity, we find that we feel safe with pain. We feel safe with love. And it's actually the other way around. But how crazy is it that we fear love instead of fear and pain? So to really reprogram someone out of their disposition into a new state is sometimes quite challenging. And until someone is truly ready to let go of everything that they are up to that point, they won't be able to move on. And you can tell me if this is true. In your case, I'm not at all familiar with your story, but perhaps what led you to that breakthrough in self-love would have been an event that suddenly catalyzed it. Is that true?
Yeah, well, it had been a few events. It was all kind of because I was always sourcing my validation and love from the outside, from modeling and from men and from any attention I could get. That was my only source of love. And there was loads of it, lovely family, loads of friends, boyfriends, everything. There was loads of external validation and love, but it just wasn't doing the thing. And then there was a few situations that I was like, wait, I'm the common denominator here. And when I realized that, it wasn't very long, probably only a week, until I was in my life, but I had an out of body experience. And I was just like, oh no, this is not me anymore. And I just quit everything. I left, I was living in New York, quit there, quit modeling, quit men, quit alcohol, went celibate, went vegan, all the things, and just left.
So your entire paradigm dropped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is what it takes for someone to truly dive into self-love. It has to consume you. It has to break all habits, all patterns, everything that you are. In fact, it's a very destructive process. And then comes the process of grieving your previous self, because you don't have the same group of friends anymore. Your family see you differently. Everything changes, but it's part of that process. And then your new self emerges. So that's for a lot of people who have this incredible explosion of love within them, suddenly everything does change for them.
I'm loving this conversation. Honestly, this is such a different conversation to what I normally have around self-love. And it's just answering so many things for me. So thank you. And hopefully for the ladies watching as well. So I just want to mention at this point, if you've got any questions or comments, or if you're like, oh my God, light bulbs, pop it into the chat and we will come to those questions at the end. And yeah, oh my God, I've got like now 100 questions I want to ask. Before I do that, I just want to mention that there is a prize for this 12 Steps of Christmas for one woman who is watching, who is engaging with the talks, engaging with the experts, doing the task each day as well. We have an actionable step each day, and you must be signed into this by email. That's the key. So if by the end of the 12 days, we'll pick one woman and you'll win a place on the self-love transformation, which starts in January, which is worth £1,000. So that's one of the announcements. And the other one is on the 29th of December, we're having our annual event. Usually it's in person in England. This year, with the thing, you know, we're doing it a little differently. We're doing it online. So it's the self-love soiree. It's a brilliant time between Christmas and New Year to wrap up everything that's happened in 2020, go through it all with a fine-tooth comb. I'll be leading you through all of this, see where you could have shifted things or tweaked things or brought something in that would have helped you, and set yourself up for the best 2021. And then we'll be opening a manifestation portal to go into 2021. And last year when we did this, and the year before that, the women that came all year long, they were messaging me saying, remember when I set that as a goal? Remember when I was manifesting that? It's happened. So it's super powerful. And yeah, I hope you can join me on the 29th of December for the Self-Love Soiree. So with that said, I would love to ask you a few more questions, if that's okay, Kaushik.
Absolutely.
Okay, one thing I was writing down, well, first of all, pain speaks louder than love. I've never really thought of it in that way. But yeah, of course, like it's all these painful patterns that are playing out and preventing us from loving. So I love that you said. And also, I talk a lot about the subconscious, the unconscious and the conscious mind. And sometimes people ask me like, what are you on about? And I would love to hear from you how you kind of explain that and how they play out.
Well, I do separate the subconscious and unconscious actually. So the subconscious for me is like the brain. The brain is anatomical, and I can explain the structures of the subconscious anatomically. For the unconscious, I refer to it as similar to the mind. So the mind is made up of thoughts, and the unconscious is made of thoughts that is not yet apparent to our conscious brain. So that's the clear sort of distinction between those two. And depending on which sort of pathway you want to go on, I can talk about the subconscious at length, and I can also talk about the unconscious at length. So yeah, you decide.
I guess what would be interesting is if a woman who's watching is maybe playing out some patterns that are preventing her from having what she really wants. What is actually happening there?
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about the, I guess, unconscious scaffolding of the mind. And the scaffolding really is the stories that we create, and these stories are often formed by pain or fear. So we've had a painful event, and what happens in our survival drives is that we create that event as quite a significant event. It sticks out so that we have this pain aversion response. It's similar to physical pain. If we touch a hot plate, our hand will instinctively come off it as an aversion response. We're not even aware of this. We are aware of it in retrospect. So similarly, the subconscious, once it experiences events, it subconsciously creates aversion responses to those. And so in a lot of cases, pain, if you're feeling really strong pain, it then creates stories. And stories can sometimes keep us paralyzed. It can keep us hostage in our own patterns, and we keep repeating that same loop over and over again, too afraid to break free of it. So there's a lot of different, I guess, psychological profiling that we can do to reveal these stories, these patterns. And I'm sure you might be using some of these yourself, but the way I work with this is that instead of working with stories, instead of giving people strategies, I work directly with the nervous system and create a sense of safety within the person. And because they feel safe, it doesn't matter what the mind is thinking or what it may agree to or not, the body is in its own autonomy. And so things like confidence, things like courage, creativity, all of this are suddenly inspired by the body. It's intrinsic rather than us trying to think our way through, because thinking, first of all, is exhausting. And we almost have to force ourselves into doing things. And I'm of the understanding that if your heart is the only decision you ever have to pay attention to, that decision is always clear, because in my framework, the heart is responsive to this moment, and only this moment is real. So the only decision you ever have to make is in this moment. So it just really streamlines a lot of the processes. You don't have to worry about what you've experienced in the past or have anxiety about the future. Nothing like that. In this moment, you are whole.
Yeah. So can you give us an example where, where that would kind of illustrate that, just in case anyone's like, oh.
So an example. So what I'm really talking about here is intuition. And for a lot of people, they might not have an experience of what intuition feels like. So I give them an exercise, which is if they have a decision to make, whether it's like, say, for example, it's something silly like, should I go out tonight or should I stay in? So in those cases, I would ask the person to visualize what it feels like to go out that night and give it full conviction and feel it, experience it, let your imagination run wild, and then let it go and let it go completely. And then pick the second option of not going out and give that full conviction without any attachment to either one of them. And one would always feel more expansive than the other. And it's easy to choose which one you'd like to go with. And it might, and I often say this, intuition sometimes is counterintuitive. You may want something, but what you actually need might be something else. And the heart always knows. So even if you disagree with your heart, the mind may disagree, you always go with your heart. And in retrospect, you can look back at the decision. You might be exhausted that night, but your heart says, go out. And you went out, and you might have met someone and it completely lit up your night. So that is a possibility as well. And there may be times when you really want to go out, but that is not what your body needs at that time. So really, really listen. And there's been so many times in my own life when I've chosen to do this, and it's never failed me. And once you start practicing this, over time, you don't even need to do the visualization anymore. It happens instantaneously because you are listening in real time.
Yeah, I do that. If I'm in a restaurant and I can't decide what to eat, I'll just close my eyes and imagine I'm eating one of them, I'm eating the other, and I see which one like my body reacts to, and I'm like, there we go. So simplified version. Yeah, I love that. And what you're saying there about when you really do listen to your intuition and your heart and your body, you can be like, I don't want to go out, but the body says yes, and then immediately you get out and you're like, oh, this is why I had to have this conversation, this is why I'm out, and you're like, okay, I get it now, thank you. Yeah. Amazing. Well, sorry,
don't need to understand why, but the only thing you need to do is commit in that moment.
Yeah, and it's a bit like manifestation. You don't need to know how, you just need to know what it is, and it's, you just leave it to trust kind of thing. So same thing, you don't need to like understand the why, it's just do what it says.
Absolutely.
And Verity is saying, I love this mix of science and self-love. Jade, hi from the UK. I see where I lack self-love when I'm around my partner. I can judge him sometimes, and I'm also judging myself. Or I don't ask for what I need, and I don't think I'm worthy of these things. So this is very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So asking for what you want is an enormous part of self-love. And in fact, for a lot of people, it might be quite scary. So I have to actually start practicing that. We have to start using words like I want, and you can fill the rest of the sentence. But once you start exercising that, you realize how powerful your desires are, and then you start choosing your desires. So, especially, I'm not familiar with whether women suppress their desires, but for men, a lot of men suppress their desires because of guilt and shame, and yeah, you really have to get them out of their comfort and start helping them to ask until they realize, wow, you can actually ask.
Yeah, I actually have a little practice that I do, which is that I have a whole page of here of I desire, I desire, I desire, I desire. It's one of my practices that I do. I just do it with my journal of all the things I desire every day. I did it this morning. So right on cue. And Susan is saying, I have a vision of pain and fear running around the brain, shouting and waving its arms, drawing attention, whilst love sat quietly in the corner, patiently waiting for us to notice it.
Yeah. So in those scenarios, even when pain is speaking the loudest, in those scenarios, all we need to do is feel. And I know that's sort of easier said than done. But if you can simply feel the pain, you might be surprised at how quickly it passes. In fact, if you don't feel the pain and you let it emerge in the mind and it starts creating stories that may even haunt you for days or even generations, there's certain pain cycles that are passed down from generation to generation as well. We don't need to live with this. All we need to do is simply feel, and it might last 5 minutes, it might last 10 minutes, but eventually it'll subside and leave. But if it emerges as a story, then that story can haunt you and hold you hostage for a very long time. So that's the cycle we need to break. Every time the mind starts creating thoughts around the pain, all we do is simply guide our attention back into our hearts. And of course, there'll be pain there, but we simply feel. And eventually what happens is though that cycle starts to fade and dissolve. And at a certain point, it completely collapses. And at that point, the only thing that is left is love. And actually, one of the other things you can do is forgive. And the hardest thing is to forgive the person who has hurt you the most. And that is exactly what you need to do to really release the pain.
Yeah, forgiveness is just so huge in this process, for sure. Yeah. Okay, so today we have a topic around emotions. So would you like to talk, well, you just did really talk a bit about this, like, you know, not attaching to that story. And is there anything else you want to say on emotions?
I think we've already covered quite a bit on emotion. The only thing I would sort of add to that is, yeah, emotion does have a temporal timescale. So it is short latency. A longer latency is feeling. These are all psychological concepts. And then we have mood, then we have temperament, and then we have disposition. So there's nothing wrong with emotion. Emotion is neither good nor bad. It's simply a messenger. And all we have to do is listen to that message. If the emotion goes, this does not feel right, this is making me angry, listen to what the emotion is saying rather than suppress it. If you're feeling a lot of emotion and tears start to flow, then let the tears flow. Tears actually, I don't know if you know, there's 3 different types of tears. So of course, the first one is when there's an irritation or something in the eyes well up with tears just to cleanse whatever dirt or debris that might be in there. There's tears of joy, and that has a very different chemical composition to tears of grief or pain. So tears, by their very nature, especially tears of grief, are extremely healing. It's the body's way of cleansing. So if we suppress that, we've just lost the opportunity to heal.
Wow. Yeah. It's like a purging from the eyes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I definitely suppressed a lot of those grief tears back in the day. I just like, can't be weak, gotta keep it in. And then I was like, no, actually, strengthen these.
We often say, oh, don't cry. But that's probably the worst thing you can say to someone who really needs to let it out.
Literally, yeah. Do cry all the time, cry all over us, let your tears flow. Yeah, I love that. So do you have an actionable step that the ladies watching can do to help them move closer to love?
Yes. So my, I guess, framework is all about listening to the heart. And the best way to do it is for the body to feel safe. So the first step is paying attention to your posture. Whether your posture is tense, whether it's aggressive or too submissive, what you want is your posture to be calm and relaxed. And you can use your breath to really do that, to relax the body. There's a very intimate relationship between breath and your heart rate. So every time you inhale, the heart rate rises. Every time you exhale, the heart rate slows down. So you can actually prolong the exhale to relax the body and relax the nervous system and bring it into that parasympathetic state. And that's all you want to do, is to keep your body in that relaxed state. So first is posture. Second, directing your attention into your heart. And this might need some practice because the mind always likes to get carried away with things. So we keep bringing the attention back to our breath, back to our hearts. And eventually there's a turning point that happens when the mind refuses to flee from the heart. And that is where you want it to be. And the third stage is actually listening to the heart. And the heart is always speaking. For some, when they're listening strongly, they can hear whispers of the heart. But for many, because we often get checked out of our body, the heart may whisper, we might not listen. Sometimes the heart may scream and we still don't listen. And sometimes the heart may throw a tantrum and then we go, oh, wow, what's going on here? The heart has been speaking all along. All we had to do is pay attention. So why not start paying attention right from the start rather than listen to when the heart is screaming?
Love that. Yeah. So to anyone watching who, because people ask me this, sometimes in a meditation, I might say, feel your heart. How does it feel? And at the end, people might say, I can't feel my heart. How do you feel your heart? How do you do that? What do you answer to that? I'm always a bit like, you just feel it.
Yeah, this is actually, it's not so easy, Gina. I've worked with a lot of patients with, say, post-traumatic stress disorder. anxiety. And in these cases, especially with cases of trauma, these people have completely checked out of their bodies. So when you say feel, they actually don't know what you're referring to. And so in order to restore that, we have to get them to feel safe in the most hostile place they feel like being alive, which is in their own body. And so once that connection to their body is established, then they can start actually feeling what the body is signaling. So it does come in stages. Sometimes we can be so full of love that we may not be able to connect with someone who doesn't feel that much love. And for us, it might be very easy, but for someone else, that is like 10 steps ahead. So yeah, it's basically we have to meet people at the stage at which they are. And sometimes love might not be the first step. Maybe the first step is for them just to connect with their own body and feel safe in that place.
I love that. And every time you say, you know, it's bringing them to that safe feeling in the body, it's like, oh yeah, it's that deep exhale. Even you just talking about it reminds me that we are safe in our body. And we have to remember that, because it can sometimes not feel that way.
Yeah. And that is the true measure of safety. I mean, if you think about it, it doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank account or how beautiful your house is or how comfortable your bed is. If there's fear in your system, you could be sleeping in the most comfortable bed, and that could be the most hostile moment to be alive. So it really is within their own body, and that's where safety begins with.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my God. So many nuggets within this. I've loved this conversation. And yeah, a few things that I love the way you talk about the inexhaustible love from within, and the pain speaks louder than love. And sometimes, and you know, all these different things that you've talked about and answered my burning questions as well. So thank you so much for that. I'm just going to quickly check if we have any other questions on the thing, although it doesn't seem to be coming up on my thing. So I tell you what, if there is any other questions, we can comment in there. If you've got any questions specifically for Kaushik, tag him in if that's okay with you, and we'll answer them afterwards. So go away and do your actionable step and let us know how it goes in the chat to be in with a chance to win the prize. And yeah, just thank you so much for giving your time. And I know it's late in Australia as well. You're in from Melbourne, aren't you?
I'm in Sydney.
Oh, Sydney, coming in from Sydney. So yeah, just thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And how can people find you going forward?
Yeah, so I guess the best place is just Google search. You can search my name, Kaushik Ram. You can find me on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram. Next year, I'm launching a new YouTube channel. That's going to be quite action-packed and exciting. It's being launched on the 4th of January. So there's a lot of amazing content about to be released. So in any of the social media channels and through my website as well, drkaushikram.com.
Fabulous. Yeah, thank you so much. So much. I'm going to go away. I've written like all these things down, and I'm just going to integrate all of that. And I'm sure there'll be lots of women asking questions and commenting. So thank you so much for your time, and speak with you soon.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Gina. And thanks so much for hosting me on this incredible community that you have.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah. Fab. Well, yeah, this is a Christmas gift, and super honored to be able to bring all these amazing experts in and just share this message, because it's so poignant, especially at Christmas. So So thank you, and good night.